Well, good morning, Biology 30s. So, we are going to finish up a lesson on Population Notes Guide 2. So, we talked about this and have already been through population growth patterns, whether it's open or closed, population growth curves. How do we tell apart J curve as opposed to an S curve? What are the different parts of the curve? What is biotic potential? So we've been through all this. We talked about the different types of environmental resistance. Are they density dependent like biotic or density independent like abiotic? And then we spent a fair amount of time talking about the different life strategies. So, whether organisms are R selected or K selected. And of course, these are the types of questions that you expect to see on assessments, like select the R selected characteristics of this particular species or organism, or what makes this R selected, etc. So numerical, multiple choice, whatever the question may be, we're going to definitely be seeing these. So just going a bit forward here. Um, we also talked about the different types of relationships, like predator prey, and sorry, I keep popping that up. We also talked about ways to avoid predation, what is a parasitic relationship versus commensalism, and so be able to identify these or describe them on a formative or a summative. Know the difference between mutualism, competition, the two different types, interspecific, and of course, interspecific between two different species, intraspecific within the same species. So we did lots of this. Now here's where we are starting up and we're picking up today is life history patterns. So it's kind of interesting. They actually have hundreds of years of data on the lynx and hare relationship. So at the bottom of this page, you can see a graph that shows the Hudson Bay Company, and they basically have over hundreds of years, 1845, 1925, and looking at the population of the lynx and the hare, you can see that they spike, they go up, and then they go down. And so we call this a boom and bust type relationship. And so the numbers spike and go up, they boom, and then they drop down again. So this is essentially a simplified version of that, showing the prey and the predator. So again, the boom and then the bust. But now here's a question for you. If these were not labeled, how would you know which was which? How would you know which was the prey and which was the predator? So I want you actually thinking back a little bit to your biology 20 days and thinking to an ecological pyramid. Think of the numbers in a pyramid. Like this is a pyramid of numbers. So at the bottom, the base is bigger, and that's where the producers are. Why? Because they have a higher population. And then a primary consumer, like the prey, like the hare, that would be next, so lower numbers. And then moving up the ecological pyramid, up the trophic levels or feeding levels, we have less numbers. And so that would be the predator. So going back to this, the predator should have less numbers than the prey. And so that's how you would know which was which. And then, what are some factors that are responsible for why these populations boom and then bust? Because it's not just predation. So, think about biotic and abiotic factors. Things like obviously, predation is one of them, parasitism, hunting, availability of food, and places to live. Abiotic factors, maybe there's a severe drought or harsh winters or forest fires that are affecting the population growth and lead to a boom and bust type population. So, next page, we have already discussed human population growth, and we've said we are case selected organisms or species. But in terms of our population graph, it should be S shaped curve. But in actuality, you can see in this diagram that it is clearly exponential growth, right? This is very much a J shaped curve. Okay, and so there's our J-shaped curve. And so we have a really long lag phase, and that's this flat portion of the curve here at the bottom. Took us a long time to get established on our planet, but now we're in this period of exponential growth, right? And so we can see here we're in exponential growth. And as I mentioned before, we don't know what our biotic potential is. What is the maximum carrying capacity? What is, like, maybe is it 6 million, is it 7 million, have we exceeded it, or is it up here somewhere? We don't know, and I guess just time will tell. So we've not reached our carrying capacity, we don't think, but our biotic potential, our maximum population growth rate, is limited by factors like how many offspring that we can have per litter, how many times a year we can reproduce, and the age at which we reach our reproductive maturity. And so those things are all built in or intrinsic characteristics that define our biotic potential, as opposed to like a bacteria, which reproduces once every 20 minutes. Well, obviously, they are going to have a higher biotic potential because they have a higher maximum growth rate. So clearly, our population is doubling, and problems you can foresee: a lack of natural resources because of competition, right? Competition for water, food, space, etc. These are all becoming in short supply. The density dependent factors can intensify. We get more environmental resistance, wars, famine, disease. Good example now, COVID. Killing our planet, we're destroying habitats, we're causing mass extinctions of populations, global climate change, acid deposition. All these things in the future or now can be problems that eventually are going to limit our human population growth. Okay, so our last concept here, and this one just seems like it's just tacked on at the end of the booklet, and it really is, but typically there's a question or two on this on the diploma. And this is about succession, which is just simply over time, and this is long time periods, there's going to be a slow, progressive replacement of one community after another until finally you get a stable community, and we call that the climax community. So there's actually two different types of succession. You need to know the difference between them. The first one, primary succession, primary, because it's the first time that succession occurs. One characteristic feature of it is that there is no soil present. So a lot of times there's really harsh conditions. So you look at this example in the diagram here, and we're talking bare rock. And so we're talking that you first got to develop soil in order for plants to grow. Because with bare rock or a volcanic island or after a glacier retreats, there's nothing for it to live on until you get soil developed. And then you're going to have pioneer organisms moving in. And these organisms are very hardy, which means they're able to survive in very extreme and harsh conditions. So like lichens, which is, when you look at a rock and it's got all that like orangey or green stuff on it. And then small plants and are going to move into the area. So this is the process of succession. We go from bare rock, we develop soil, and then we get these pioneer species. Then we get herbs and grasses and ground cover. Then we get shrubs and some trees, and eventually we get larger trees. So the pioneers are replaced by a bunch of intermediate stages of organisms. And of course, each time there's a different population of plants, there's going to be a different population of animals and other organisms based on what that community structure is. And finally, we're going to reach a climax community. Climax community is typically going to be either a deciduous forest or a coniferous forest. You guys know what I mean, conifers, cone-bearing trees. Okay, and so that is our stable climax community. And this is a process that this is not happening overnight. This is taking hundreds of years. And it's this slow progression from one stage to the next, to the next. And of course, every time we're replacing a plant population, it's going to have a different set of organisms like animals that can live there as well. That's primary succession. No soil, harsh conditions, got to develop soil first. Secondary succession, a little bit different because secondary, well, why is it secondary? Because it's the second time that succession is happening. So soil was already present. We don't have to make soil from the beginning. It's not like there was some kind of a volcanic island or rocks where there was no soil, but there has been some type of disturbance to the ecosystem. So, in a lot of examples, like northern Alberta, we are familiar with, there's been forest fires, and that destroys either partially or completely that community, and then it has to regrow. Succession has to happen a second time over. So, soil is present in this one. And like, here's our ecological disturbance, a fire or something like that. And then we are replaced by, after the fire, the disturbance occurs, we already have soil present. And through hundreds of years, we're going to start building back the community structure that was once present. So we get our pioneer species first, like the lichens, and we get a bunch of grasses and perennials, ground cover, and then we get our intermediate species, and then they are replaced over time, over hundreds of years, eventually by a climax community. And so this takes time. And again, this is the second time this is happening. Why? Because there is already soil present, but there was some kind of a disturbance to that ecosystem. So, just to summarize, we've got what is succession definition. It's a change and it's gradual. So, we're talking hundreds of years, not overnight, in the community structure. So we start out with the pioneer species, the first ones to move in. They're really hardy, they can withstand extremes. Typically, these are our selected species. And then they're replaced by secondary species like grasses and mosses and herbs. And then as the plant communities change, so do the animals to follow, right? And there's going to be different animals depending on what the plants are. Then these communities are replaced by another intermediate or another intermediate and another intermediate. And this keeps on going many years until we finally reach a climax community. And this is our stable community. And as I mentioned, like conifers, very K-selected, long-living species, that is going to be our community. And this will last for many, many years. Okay, so you guys just have a couple of questions to do on this. Succession, the difference between primary and secondary, a pioneer and a climax community. And that's it for, well, pretty much our Biology 30. That's it, that's all. All right, have a great rest of your day.